All right, welcome back for another lesson here. We're going to go over again some Valvetrain components and Valvetrain theory. We'll call this Valvetrain components and theory part 2. We're going to go through and just name real quick these components. We've got our valve springs here, as you guys can see. They clearly look like springs. We've got our rocker arms. We've got our timing belt here. Big belt, bunch of little ribs on it. Teeth, if you want to call them that. These are our valve spring clips or valve spring retainer clips or just valve clips. And these two are our valves. You notice this one's a little dark and burnt. You could probably guess which one that is if you had to. And this one's nice and clean. It's not because I cleaned one and didn't clean the other. It's because this is our intake side and this is our exhaust side. The intake side really just gets clean air and fuel on it. The exhaust side, as you probably imagine, gets a bunch of dirt and grime on it because it's exhaust flowing out. This right here is our camshaft. What we're going to look at here on the camshaft is, I'm going to show this the best I can, is we see this sort of pear-shaped object on our camshaft going right around here. You can hold it on its side. If I rotate it over, it seems to appear and then disappear. And appear again and disappear. All right? That is called our lobe, L-O-B-E, lobe. And what that's going to do is, as it rotates around, or push out our rocker arm here, and then it's going to rotate back and allow the rocker arm to come in again, and just ride along the back, the small side of the lobe. As the camshaft rotates around and it pushes the rocker arm out, the valve and valve spring get pushed down. You could imagine the valve being right up here, pushing up against the rocker arm, the valve spring resting inside the valve clip like this. And this whole unit pushing up the valve into the rocker arm. And the cam lobe pushes out the bottom of the rocker arm. The valve gets pushed down into the combustion chamber, allowing air gas to either flow in the case of the intake valve, or exhaust gas be pushed out on the case of the exhaust valve. So why does timing need to be set properly? There's a whole litany of reasons. I'm going to break it down into 3. So the spark will fire at the right time. We'll talk about the magneto and electronics in another unit, another video. Maintain compression during compression and power stroke. So we need the valves to be seated up against the valve seats so that they are literally just pulled up like so that no gases are escaping or entering that we don't want in there. And also to allow for air gas to come into the intake and allow for exhaust gas to be pushed out on their respective strokes. So the camshaft, again, during this whole section, when the rocker arms are riding on this section here of the camshaft, they're not being forced open, nor are they being forced closed. They're just, or they're being, I guess they're allowed to stay closed, allowed the valves to stay closed. So that's an important thing there. Only when the lobe is pushing out on the rocker arm is the valve being forced open. Now, what can go wrong if timing is not set right? A whole litany of things in something as big as a car. I'm going to break it down to 2 small things here. The first thing is the piston can slam into an open valve. If, for some reason, the camshaft is rotated to such a way, the rocker arm is rotated, or the timing is set improperly, the camshaft could be rotating over, forcing the rocker arm to rock out of the way or to rock down and push our valve down into the combustion chamber, either early or late, keep it open too late or too long. And the piston is going to come up and it's going to slam into that potentially. And that could cause a serious problem, such as damaging the piston or damaging the valve. When that happens, generally, it's rather catastrophic for your engine. There's no mistaking that sound. You're going to hear a loud banging and it's going to repeat many, many times over until you stop your engine. Another thing, a little less concerning, but still of concern, the spark may not fire at the right time. All right, now we've got valve overlap. I'm going to briefly explain that. Valve overlap is when the exhaust and intake valve are open at the same time, which forces more air-gas mixture into the combustion chamber and more exhaust out at the same time. So, very brief moment between the exhaust stroke while it's coming up all the way. The cam is going to have both of these opened up just a little bit, and then the exhaust valve is going to close and the intake valve is going to continue to open. Intake valve closes, compression, power, exhaust valve opens on the exhaust stroke, and it slowly, right near the bottom, the intake valve is going to open, and they're both going to be open at the same time for a brief while. This is very, very brief. We call that brief time valve overlap. What's happening there is the heat that's been generated and the forcing out of the gases of the exhaust causes this sort of, I've heard it explained as a supercharging effect. It's going to force more clean air gas into the combustion chamber, and a little bit gets out, but at the same time it's going to push some of that exhaust gas, or a little bit extra of that exhaust gas out, and it helps the engine run a little more efficiently and generate a little more power. An example of an engine which has its timing intentionally delayed. So you always want your timing set right, but some company, or one company in particular, is notorious for setting their timing so that the intake valve opens a little later than it should, possibly closes a little later than it should, and the exhaust valve opens a little later than it should and closes a little later than it should. Not so much dealing with the valve overlap, but more so just with the timing. That would be Harley-Davidson. Their engines, they intentionally make them so that they delay the timing. Harley-Davidson intentionally makes their engines so that they delay the timing, and that helps give them their very unique sound that's rather unmistakable. How do you change valve overlap, and why would someone do this? Generally, what you would need to do is change the shape of this pear or egg shape, your lobe on your cam. You would need to change this shape going around. You need to make it probably like a little broader out here. Now, you wouldn't just change that by adding something to this camshaft. More than likely what you would do is you would just buy a whole new camshaft with a different egg shape to it, a different pear shape to it, or a different lobe shape to it. And that is going to adjust when your valves open and close. You'll hear people talk about doing putting new cams in their car. And the reason why they would do that is really, by and large, to get more power. This is very common for people with Corvettes and Ford Mustangs to do, because it's very easy. They have overhead cams in their engines generally, and you just pull off the cylinder heads, drop new cams in, put the covers back on, and that's about it. It's very quick, very easy, and it's very cheap way really to get an extra anywhere from maybe 50 to 100 horsepower even out of your car. How do you change the timing now? We're talking about changing the timing. Again, not the valve overlap. We're sort of bouncing back and forth here. You want to adjust where the timing belt or chain sits on the gears. So instead of maybe the timing sitting here, you might move it over a tooth. The only reason you would do this is if when you were aligning the timing on your camshaft to your crankshaft, you noticed you aligned it wrong. And if you started your car with your timing aligned wrong, you probably did catastrophic damage. There's no two ways around it really. If you didn't, you're extremely lucky. You've still probably did some sort of damage, but it's something you get right the one time, and that's it. You cannot get it wrong. Should you ever adjust the timing outside of what the engine specifies on your own as an attempt to increase power? No. You always want your timing set to whatever your engine specifications are. Don't want to go outside that. So leave it however your manufacturer says and run with that. That's about all we've got for this lesson today. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.